Hello everyone, welcome back to the Linux tutorials. These tutorials are brought to you by ZDUP Technologies and Services. In this video tutorial, we are going to compare the Unix operating system with the Linux operating system. So the first question that must come to your mind is, why is there a need of comparing the Unix and the Linux operating systems? Well, there is a common notion, and some people think that Unix and Linux are synonyms, but that is not true. Many operating systems were developed to be like Unix because it is one of the oldest operating systems, but no other operating system gained the popularity as Linux did. Linux is the clone of Unix. It has similar features that as of Unix. Still, there are differences between the two. Before Linux and Windows operating system, the computer world was dominated by Unix. However, the name Unix is a copyrighted name. So there are different IT giants that only could use the Unix operating systems till date. They include IBM, HP, and Sun Solaris. So that is what Unix is. However, Linux, as we know, is open source, freely available operating system that could be customized by each and every one out there as per their choice, and could also be redistributed. So that is why we need to compare the two, so that the common notion that Linux and Unix are synonyms are removed. So for the comparison basis, what we have done is we have listed some of these criteria. There are actually 14 criteria on the basis of which we are going to compare the Unix and the Linux operating systems, and these 14 criteria are like this. So let us start with the comparison. The first criteria on which we are going to compare the two is their definition. If we talk about Linux, so Linux is an open source operating system that is freely available to everyone. Each and everyone could use it, could customize it, could redistribute it. Unix, on the other hand, could only be used by its copywriters or the people who have purchased it or have acquired its license. If we talk about the users or the number of users, so Linux, owing to its open source nature and freely available usage, it is available for everyone to use, so it is in great demand and it could be used in different places, whether it is a PC, a workstation, an embedded system, a specialized computer, everywhere. However, Unix, if we talk about Unix, it was mainly developed for servers, workstations, and the mainframe computers. If we talk about the usage of Unix, so Unix is used in, again, servers, workstations, and PCs, so it has a limited usage. Its scope is limited. However, Linux is used everywhere. That ranges from servers, PCs, smartphones, tablets, supercomputers, embedded systems, specialized computers, everywhere, which makes it to have a huge market for usage. If we talk about the cost, so Linux, we know, is freely available. Also, if we talk about the priced distributions of Linux, so they are cheaper than the Windows operating system. Unix, on the other hand, has the copyrighted vendors who decide that what is the cost of Unix operating system, so it is quite expensive. If we talk about development, so owing to the open source nature, Linux is developed by the sharing and the collaboration of the people all over the world. The developers from all over the world could come together and contribute in the development of Linux. Unix, however, was developed by AT&T Bell Laboratories and the various commercial vendors and NGOs or the non-profit organizations. And if we talk about the developer of Linux, so Linus Torvalds was the one who developed Linux. Manufacturer So on the basis of manufacturer, if we talk about Linux, the Linux kernel is developed by a community of developers from the different parts of the world. However, Linus Torvalds still oversees the things. Unix, however, has three distributions, that is IBM AIX, HP UX, and Sun Solaris. Apple also uses Unix to make the OS X operating system. If we talk about the GUI, Linux is command based, but some distributions like Ubuntu provide a graphical user interface. GNOME and KDE are the most commonly used desktop environments for the GUI purposes. Unix initially was based on command, but the common desktop environment was created later on, and now most of the Unix distributions use GNOME itself. If we talk about interface, so the default interface or the default shell for Linux is the GNU Born Again shell, but there are some distributions that have their own interface. For Unix, the Bourne shell was used originally, but it is also compatible with others interfaces as well. If we talk about the support of the file system, so Linux supports more file systems than Unix. However, Unix, if we talk about it, so yeah, it supports lesser files than Linux. Coding, so Linux is the clone of Unix. It behaves like Unix, but it does not contain the code of Unix. It is based on Unix, it is its clone, but it is not Unix. Unix, different coding is present in it. It is developed by AD&T Bear Laboratories, so whatever the coding of Unix is, it is exclusive to them. If we talk about the operating system component, so Linux is just the kernel, it is not the whole operating system. However, when we are talking about its distribution, then it is packed together and distributed as a whole package. But actually, Linux is just the kernel, not the whole operating system. Unix, on the other hand, is the whole operating system, that is, it provides the complete package, which includes the kernel, the shell, everything that you require in a complete operating system is provided by Unix. If we talk about the security, so Linux provides higher security than Unix. Around 60 to 100 viruses have been listed in Linux till date, and security against them are provided by Linux. Unix is also highly secured. Around 120 viruses have been listed for Unix, and security is provided against them. So if we talk about data security, both Linux and Unix takes data security very seriously. Error detection and its removal, so this is a very important criteria. If we talk about Linux, since it is open source, so if any person discovers any kind of error, so that error or if it is any kind of threat that is experienced by any person all around the world, due to the strong community support and open source nature, that person can post that error online and can receive help from people all over the world. That is why error detection and its removal is a fast process. It is more reliable process in Linux than in Unix, because if a problem occurs in Unix, since it is a copyright software, so only the people working in that particular company or that are allowed to have access to such confidential information can work on the error and try to remove it. So if there is a thing that of error removal and detection, Linux is preferred over Unix. If we talk about some of the examples of Linux, so the examples are its different distributions, which we have already read about, such as Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise, Fedora, Linux Mint, Arch Linux, etc. If we talk about Unix, then it's 3 copyrighted versions with IBM AIX, HP UX, and Sun Solaris are its 3 examples. So this is how we can compare the 2 operating systems, Linux and Unix. And after learning about these comparison criteria, I hope you are able to make out that these both of them are not same. Linux is different and Unix is different. So people who think they are synonyms is actually not correct. Linux is open source while Unix is copyrighted. So that's all for this video. and